Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on the NDP leadership race winding to a close. But first, drawing doctors north of the border.
British Columbia is ready to welcome you with open arms. We have a public healthcare system. We respect science. We respect reproductive rights. We have highly inclusive and welcoming workplaces and communities.
BC's message to American health professionals and to help the process along, that province, is streamlining how credentials are recognized, as well as quickly helping candidates find and apply for jobs. And in less than a year, more than 400 have made the move, including 89 doctors, 260 nurses, and 42 nurse practitioners. Joining us now, Dr. Brian Worsba, a general internal medicine specialist and president of the Alberta Medical Association. Dr. Worsba, good to see you, sir. Welcome to Alberta Primetime.
Good to see you. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. So what do you make of BC's approach to targeting and attracting health professionals from south of the border, and how do you weigh their results?
Well, I mean, as you know, healthcare providers, healthcare workers are in a very competitive marketplace, and we're always competing with other provinces and other jurisdictions. And with some of the things that are happening south of the border, we do know that a number of provinces, as you highlighted, British Columbia most recently, have been targeting American healthcare workers, physicians, and other allied health workers. And you know, it's great for British Columbia. We do know that Alberta is also looking at recruiting high-quality healthcare workers that can help fill gaps. We've been successful in some areas, but there's still some more recruitment areas that we need.
Well, and so then to what degree do you see Alberta tailoring efforts to tap that American market, you know, making a concerted push to draw U.S. doctors?
Yeah, to date, I haven't seen any specific recruitment efforts for physicians into the United States. My understanding is that there are recruitment efforts for some of the other allied health professionals. That said, we're also seeing, you know, physicians that we train in Alberta move to other jurisdictions because of that competitive marketplace. And, you know, Alberta needs to remain competitive.
How easy or difficult might it be for an American physician to come practice here in Alberta? I mean, are there lessons we could learn from what they're doing next door in BC?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always lessons, particularly for those types of physicians that are practicing in areas that we might not have enough of. I'm thinking of anesthesia or, you know, some of our surgical specialties. You know, the actual ability for an American trained physician to move over to Canada, I don't think is arduous. There certainly are requirements that, you know, are necessary, and, you know, to get accreditation through our college and licensure, but you know, those aren't insurmountable and certainly aren't you know, different, you know, significantly different than anywhere else in the country. So,
coming from America or otherwise as a destination, how does Alberta compare as somewhere to come for doctors from elsewhere?
Well, I think it's important to remember that physicians move, you know, based on a variety of different reasons. It's the ability to practice the type of medicine that they want to practice. It's the infrastructure that's available, you know, particularly when it comes to resources that require more than just a regular office. So surgeons have different requirements, and there's different recruitment options available. Physicians move because of lifestyle, because of, you know, what a place can offer for their family, you know, who's moving with them. Often partner job opportunities are also important. That's one of the reasons why we have seen, you know, a significant increase in new physicians in some of the urban centers, but we're still struggling in some of the smaller communities and regional centers. And I think, you know, some of the lessons that we can learn are how do we actually support recruitment to those lesser or those areas that are more challenging to recruit to, those cities and towns that are more challenging to recruit to, but still offer a great opportunity for physicians to work. I also think that you know, locally, individual towns and cities have started to actually come up with innovative ways to recruit people, and I think we should be seeing more of that in the future.
The government's move or making changes such that a dual practice model can come into play, where doctors can practice in both public and in a private setting. How do you expect that to impact or influence the draw of doctors here to Alberta?
I think that might attract some types of physicians, certain types of practices that might be more conducive to that dual practice model. It wouldn't necessarily attract physicians who have no interest or the ability to actually practice in a private or dual model system. So it remains to be seen. The details of exactly what that dual model will eventually look like have not been finalized, and again, I think it might attract some physicians, but at the same time will not solve all the problems. As an organization, the AMA is very focused on ensuring that we are recruiting physicians to participate in high value care, that care where physicians or where patients most need expertise, and the payback for providing that level of care is significant. Some of the concerns that we are seeing relate to physicians participating in sometimes lower value care, where it's Alberta has an ability to provide physicians an opportunity to practice where patients are getting service and services that they desire, but not necessarily ones that are leading to long-term better outcomes. And so we really need to look at what types of healthcare workers are coming to Alberta, try to really make it attractive for those that are providing that high value care, and have a better understanding of where physicians are actually working and what they're doing.
All right, maybe it's one final question for you. Pre-budget last month, the government pledged an additional $1.4 billion for, I believe what it called physician recruitment, training, compensation, and development, calling it the largest investment in physicians in Alberta's history. There was a degree of uncertainty at the time about where the government was going with that announcement. How much clarity does your organization have now 1 month later?
Yeah. After looking at those numbers, we do see that what the government did was correct for previous underinvestment in the physician services budget. So it's not necessarily new money. It's new money in the budget for sure, but that money is being spent already on the physicians that are here. We have seen the government talk about the increased number of physicians that we have in the province. Again, the total number of physicians doesn't really tell the story of where they're working, but when physicians are working in the province and are being paid by the province, that leads to increased budget requirements. And so we were happy to see that the government has finally recognized that after several years of essentially under budgeting despite what was actually being paid out.
All right.
So it wasn't, just to be clear, it wasn't new money. We believe that, although it's a 22% increase in the budgeting amount, the actual amount that would essentially be considered new above utilization is about 1.6%.
Okay. Sir, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Appreciate your time this evening, Dr. Werspa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Dr. Brian Werspa is an internal medicine specialist and president of the Alberta Medical Association. From federal New Democrats preparing to pick a new leader, to Alberta's doctor recruitment efforts, and Jason Kenney's name back in the headlines. Time now for tonight's politics panel. Joining us this evening, former MLA Karen McPherson and Najib Judd, political advisor and brand strategist who's worked on election campaigns at every level of government here and abroad. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with a race to the finish.
So we don't change what we believe as New Democrats, but we need to start talking to people about it in a way that they can hear us. You know, we need to set a bigger table. We need to welcome more people into our party. I think most Canadians have the values, share the values that we have as New Democrats.
With the world coming unraveled, war and threat of annexation from the United States, we need to stay focused on what everyday Canadians need to get by and to actually create solutions as big as these crises that we face that would slash the cost of living for Canadians.
Avi Lewis and Edmonton MP Heather McPherson, front-runners among the 5 candidates vying for leadership of the federal NDP. And after 6 months of campaigning, the outcome of the race will be determined this weekend with the close of online voting. Karen, the party's about to open a convention over the next couple of days in Winnipeg, and that'll culminate in the outcome of the race. What do you think New Democrats have been weighing in marking those online ballots and making their picks for the next leader?
They're weighing who can rebuild the party, who's going to be most effective at building the party again. Their caucus has shrunk even further now with the crossing of the floor of 1 MP. So now they only have 6 seats in the House of Commons, which is half as much as they need to have official party status. So which one of the leadership candidates is going to be able to rebuild the party, be able to gain traction again nationally, who has, very good name recognition across the country and credibility. All of those things are going to be taken into account. And this convention it has the highest number of delegates the NDP have ever seen, in contrast to the lowest number of seats they've ever seen. So it's an interesting time for the NDP for sure.
Najib, 6 months in, and the end is finally in sight in this campaign. Where do you see this leadership race landing on the radar of Canadians generally? Has it garnered the degree of attention warranted of a federal party?
Well, no, it isn't. No, it hasn't. According to the latest Angus Reid poll, 44% of their own voters can't name any of the contenders for the leadership race after 6 months of this race going on. So that doesn't bode well. The other thing is that in that same poll, 24% think that the parties are irrelevant, and another fifth of the past voters say that the party doesn't represent the working class anymore, which I think is a core issue with this party, and I don't think that it is gaining attention, because I think some of the policies that are very popular with Canadians right now, they're shying away from. The 2 front runners, don't have anything that's remarkable or really resonates with their voters or even Canadians. The other contenders who are not even polling at double digits, are talking about UBI, wealth tax, free university, things that are really important, especially in terms of cost of living and other concerns of Canadians. And the front runners are the same old stuff, which is important, but I don't think really resonates with Canadians.
Karen, Avi Lewis has certainly been the front runner where fundraising is concerned. Is that enough to overcome Heather McPherson's experience as an Alberta MP?
Well, statistically in the past, yes, that is enough. It'll be interesting. It's a fairly close race. It looks like there's about 4% difference in their polling numbers so far going into the convention this weekend. Heather has a lot of recognition as a sitting MP. She's done fairly well at getting media attention for herself just as an MP outside of the leadership race. Of course, Lewis is pretty polarizing. He's had an impact, especially in Alberta. There was quite a schism between him and the Alberta NDP. So I don't know, it's really interesting. And the fact that they have so many delegates, it seems like that 4% could be eaten away, just depending on how much GOTV each of the candidates is doing.
Najib, on that point of the schism with the Alberta NDP, LEAP manifesto comes to mind after how many years? How do you see Avi Lewis as an NDP leader landing here in Alberta?
Well, it's going to be tough for him because of the LEAP manifesto, which is against fossil fuels. But again, going back to my other point, it's always the other parties will always adopt from the left, from progressive parties, the policies that are popular. Like in this case, in the LEAP manifesto, it was national childcare, which the Liberals took on and are pushing forward. So I think that this is the issue with this party, is that the things that people really care about, the things that are popular with Canadians, this party bulks away from. And I think that has been an issue for the multiple past elections, especially under Jagmeet Singh. It's like the really progressive, the really popular things that Canadians want. This party shies away from those things and focuses on, the same run-of-the-mill policies that the other parties are running on.
Karen, how different an NDP do you see coming out the other side of this leadership race, this convention? What does this party look like next week?
It depends on a couple of things: who's going to win the leadership race, and also the kind of campaign that's required to win a leadership race and attract new party members is different than a national campaign in a federal election, where you have a broader net to cast to try and attract more votes from undecided voters who aren't necessarily your core supporters. So we're going to see a difference. It's absolutely necessary if the NDP wants to maintain any relevance at all, now that they're down to 6 seats. What that exactly looks like, I think, is going to depend on who actually takes the mantle of leadership and how they decide to execute their plans.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, doctor recruitment and building up to debates on separatism. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. We heard from Alberta Medical Association President Dr. Brian Wurzba off the top this evening on the issue of recruiting physicians to our province. Najib, it was a conversation driven by what's happening next door in BC and how that province is striving to draw health professionals north of the border. What's your takeaway on possible lessons Alberta could learn here?
Well, it's no secret, and it's not rocket science, Michael, that people will go where the jobs are, especially if you make that transition easier through immigration and recognizing of foreign credentials and licensing and helping with costs and things like that. People will come. And we saw that with the Alberta is Calling campaign, right? We saw that how successful that is, positioning Alberta as more affordable. So, the problem in this province is that this government is not interested in improving healthcare for Albertans. They're interested in eroding the healthcare and privatizing it. So they don't have a vested interest in doctors coming here and helping doctors to come here, as we saw for the comments. So I just think that, if the political will is there, anything is possible. And the government has a responsibility to have these to invest in these kinds of recruitment campaigns. But I just don't think the political will is here in Alberta.
Karen, what do you make of Alberta's recruitment efforts? And is this the moment to capitalize on the availability of prospective candidates from the U.S. in the way that BC is?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily going to be in the way that BC is. They have a different perspective on healthcare, as Najib was referencing. I think it is a good moment to do it. There certainly is, dissatisfaction within the U.S. for many people with how things are going in their country. But really, $450 million for hiring and training, it's not a huge budget. And what it hasn't been detailed is what is that going to result in doctor-patient ratios. Apparently there were 796 doctors hired within Alberta Health last year. And how many more do we need in order to have a satisfactory doctor-patient ratio where people aren't waiting a long time, first of all, for a primary care doctor, but also within all the other services like emergency rooms and urgent care, and waiting for more specialized things like hip replacements and knee replacements and surgeries that are being put off for a long time because there is a shortage of all resources, including doctors.
All right. We have time for one more topic, and that is Jason Kenney taking up the Canadian cause. The former premier is set to participate in a pair of debates about separatism, the first happening in Edmonton May 1st, put on by a members-only conservative nonprofit organization. Now, his opponent, Keith Wilson, a longtime Alberta lawyer, among Wilson's high-profile cases representing a few of the organizers of the Freedom Convoy. Karen, the agenda for this first debate revolves around economic fairness, and the combatants are to argue about which path helps that goal. What kind of attention do you see this drawing?
Well, it is a pretty closed group. Like you said, it's members only of the Civitas Canada group, which is a right-wing group. I don't know. It'll get some attention. I'm not sure how broadly based it is. An interesting thing about Wilson as well is that he's a member of the Alberta Prosperity Project. And overall, there's a little bit of irony, Jason Kenney coming to the table to debate this issue when, because of his efforts to bring together conservatives to form the United Conservative Party, he really invited in that fringier element that has evolved into separatism. So it's kind of like closing the barn door after the horses have fled. I'm not sure how effective these debates are going to be in persuading anyone that's convinced that they need and want separation to remain in Canada. It does do some lifting of Kenney's profile throughout the country.
Well, and on that point, Najib, what kind of moment do you expect this to represent for Jason Kenney? What might he get out of this in championing the Canadian cause, which is something he has been quite outspoken on?
Who would have thought that Jason Kenney would be the hero that Alberta needs? It's amazing to see what can happen when you're free from party ideology. Much like our Premier Smith is trying to keep both factions in her party happy, the separatists and those who don't want to separate. It's interesting. This isn't the first separatist movement in Alberta. Over the years, there's been many. This is the first one where I think it's quite obvious who the interested parties are. The biggest one being the U.S. and their president has been very clear, in their intentions to want Alberta to secede and become the 51st state. The U.S. gets 60% of its crude from Alberta. So it's easy to see, given what we've seen in global politics with Venezuela and now Iran, of what the U.S. interests are and who's feeding this movement. So we have to be careful, and yet. There's two sides. There's a majority of people that clearly want to stay, and stay part of the Confederation. But the Maple Megas, as they call them, they're fractured, right? Because they don't know if they want to secede, if they want to be annexed by the U.S., if they want a mixture of both. So they themselves don't have a single unifying goal.
Karen, I think we have maybe about 30 seconds left. At the end of the day, how do you see this first debate playing on the political stage?
Fodder for the opposition in Alberta, which is kind of a weird space to be in, agreeing with Jason Kenney, and probably largely ignored by the government as, they haven't come out in strong defense of staying in Canada, and they haven't come out strongly for separation. So I think we'll continue to see that zip-lip. Well,
the timing is certainly interesting. May 1st for this first debate, and the separation petition has its deadline on May the 2nd. All right, folks, we'll have to leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Michael.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about 3 more premiers, including Saskatchewan's Scott Moe, joining the Alberta Premier's call this week for more input in judicial appointments, despite the federal justice minister saying the system will not change. Sub says we need to start elections on judges and senators. We need term limits as well. Rob writes, a conservative politician wants more conservative judges. Color me shocked. Long thinks it's crystal clear that the federal Liberal Party isn't interested in any cooperation or creative input. Something needs to change immediately. Lucas says, after this, I will never vote Conservative again. When you pick the judges, it's just a matter of time until there will be a dictatorship. Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, from questions for the Premier on the strain of taxation to a new framework for councillor accountability. We'll find out what municipal leaders are focusing on at their spring caucus. That's on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.